The Rookie has been on the air for over 7 years now, and with over 120 episodes and 3.5 days of runtime, there's bound to be crazy moments, controversy, behind-the-scenes drama, and so much more. This is the Rookie Iceberg, and if you've never seen an Iceberg video before, the gist of it is that we start with the most widely known or tame aspects of the show at the tip of the iceberg, and then we make our way down to the obscure and crazy topics in the abyss. And I think that even the biggest fans of The Rookie may not know a few of the things on this iceberg. So let's just jump right in to The Rookie Iceberg. Titus Leaving. This is talking about the entire situation that happened behind the scenes with Titus Mackin Jr., the actor for Jackson West, as well as how this situation plagued the entire 3rd season into being one of the worst rated and controversial seasons in the show's history. In 2020, before they started filming for the 3rd season of the show, the BLM movement began to gain traction after an event that happened in June of that year. If you know, you know. Titus began to feel discomfort in acting as a black cop in a TV show that didn't really lean into the discriminatory side of policing. So him, alongside Richard T. Jones, the actor for Lieutenant Gray, requested a storyline to be present in season 3 about racial discrimination to shine a light on the current issues. The showrunners agreed, but Titus wanted more than just one plotline. He demanded that a large portion of the 3rd season involved the same plotline, and then the rest of the season needed to be written with more of those themes even after the large plotline was over. Titus said that he was going to leave the show, but if they did all of this, he would stay for the 4th season and onwards. Since Jackson West was such a major character at the time, the showrunners agreed again, and they wrote the 3rd season in a completely different tone and manner from the first 2. Unfortunately for them, the fans noticed the shift almost right away. These changes resulted in the show being extremely controversial, with the average episode scoring more than a point less on each episode compared to the first 2 seasons. This is because people believe that the showrunners went to the opposite extreme and that the writing was too preachy, rather than reasonably covering the issues. I think everyone here can agree that these topics should have been talked about at this point in history, but the way that it was written brought it down. What's worse, Titus left the show after the 3rd season anyway, so he backed out of his deal, and the 3rd season will be plagued with this for eternity. DOD, also known as Day of Death, is the most gruesome and one of the most popular episodes in the show's history. This episode involves Lucy being kidnapped by Caleb Wright, a puppet of Rosalind Dyer who was in jail at this point, and she was taken to the middle of nowhere, where Caleb proceeded to tattoo the date on her upper rib. This date was to signify the day in which she would die. He used this as a way to help her accept her day of death.
You know what it is? Tell me.
My day of death?
She wasn't having this though, so she tried to escape. However, she fails, which made Caleb angry. So he decided that the best punishment was to instead bury the barrel outside instead of inside, where nobody could find her even if they tried. Lucy slowly was losing oxygen in the barrel for hours, and she was slowly losing hope. But while all of this was happening, Tim and the rest of the LAPD were doing everything they could to save her. They find the house and they kill Caleb, but because they killed him, now they don't know where Lucy is. The entire LAPD started searching outside in a panic. Luckily, they do find her. This is because of a ring that she strategically threw off her finger to identify that she was underneath where it was. All of this led to the episode being in the top 5 best rated episodes and is a fan favorite, edging out other popular episodes like Wildfire, Mutiny and the Bounty, and Time of Death. Castle. This refers to the previous show that Nathan Fillion, the actor for Nolan, did for 8 seasons between 2009 and 2017. The show focused on detective work rather than cop work, but the general premise of working in law enforcement seems to be something that Nathan really likes to play as. There were some behind-the-scenes problems that plagued the show in the later seasons, including Nathan and the other lead absolutely despising each other, but the show was still very popular, and some of those fans followed Nathan to The Rookie. Fans were not the only people to follow him to The Rookie though, because Nathan routinely invited old cast members from Castle to guest star in The Rookie. Some examples of this are Molly Quinn, who was a woman who was arrested for a kidnapping scheme, Tox Alagundoy, who played Nolan's college professor, Tamala Jones, who played Aaron Thorson's mother, and even Annie Wershing, who played the notorious serial killer Rosalind Dyer. This isn't the only show Nathan took previous cast members from to guest star in The Rookie, but we'll get back to the other show later. Chenford. Chenford is by far the most popular couple in the show, though it is also the most rocky and unstable. Much of the reason that this couple is more popular with the fans than all the others is because it was a slow-burning relationship that took over 4 seasons to develop before they even got together. And I would even argue that they're still slowly burning in present day. This, paired with the taboo dynamic of the relationship, makes for a lot of audience interest, as people would tune in to every episode specifically to see if there were any updates to Chenford and their relationship. The couple began to really gain traction when they finally got together though, as when seasons 5 and 6 were airing, many TikToks and YouTube shorts began to go viral, bringing even more attention to Tim and Lucy as well as The Rookie itself. Oscar Hutchinson is the longest recurring and most parasitic villain to be a part of the show, as he is actually the only villain in the entire show to be present in every single season. He is also an extreme sociopath who would do literally anything to get ahead. No matter if what he has to do is good or bad overall, that doesn't actually matter to him. He could help the LAPD with an investigation into a prison in one episode, and then he could break out of prison after beating up another inmate to get information in the next one. All that matters is that he got what he wanted. Oscar actually has one of the most interesting dynamics with one of the main characters, which is the feud between him and Officer Nolan. Well, if you can call it a feud. So while Nolan sees Oscar as one of his mortal enemies that needs to be stopped, Oscar normally just sees Nolan as a pawn to get further ahead, and this is really evident in a lot of their interactions throughout the show. Lopez. This is the relationship and marriage between Angela Lopez and Wesley Evers, and they are the second most popular relationship in the show. While it's very far behind Chenford in popularity, Lopez still stands on their own and has their own chunk of the fan base as well. Lopez is also the longest running relationship that was made during the show, as they began dating all the way back during season 1. Their relationship also started off super rocky, as in the beginning of the show for the first few seasons, Lopez was a TO then detective, and Wesley was a public defender. This means that they not only had completely opposite jobs, but they also had very different ideologies about how things needed to be done. Over time though, these differences began to grow closer to one another, as Lopez began to take on some progressive values. On the other hand, Wesley started to understand how policing works and its importance, so he switched from being a public defender to a district attorney. Despite all of their differences though, Lopez and Wesley always seemed to work through every single problem they ever had because of the love that they have for each other, and that it's stronger than their differing opinions. This is a couple who literally would sneak to another country where the other is held hostage to try and save them. Like when Wesley went to get back Lopez from La Fiera in Guatemala in season 4 episode 1. Their love is unwavering compared to pretty much every other couple in the show. Nepotism. This point is referring to the character Raj, who is played by the son of Alexi Hawley, Xander. The biggest problem with Raj is he wasn't initially supposed to be a character at all, and the only reason that his character was on the show in the first place was because of nepotism. He was first introduced as an unnamed band singer in season 5's episode appropriately named Daddy Cop, as the song that he and his band sings is called Daddy Cop. This was during the intro of the episode, and the combination of the catchy song alongside Nolan's amazing reaction had fans thinking this intro was hilarious, and the showrunners took note of this. Later in season 6 episode 2 The Hammer, the band was brought back and was better than ever, as now they had a choir to sing the chorus as well as they had a guitar solo. Fans also ate this up and thought this was the funniest gag in the show. However, the showrunners didn't understand what people actually liked about it this time, as when Roger was introduced as Selena's boyfriend in season 7 episode 10 Chaos Agent, people were less than enthusiastic for his debut. Xander's acting chops just weren't there, as he had no experience in acting and was more of a musician. This was also coupled with the fact that he was just thrown into a recurring character role without any sort of acting chemistry with the rest of the cast, which made scenes with him extremely awkward. Cholan. Cholan refers to the relationship between Lucy Chen and John Nolan that took place in the early part of the first season. This went on from the pilot episode up until season 1 episode 4 The Switch, so the relationship didn't actually last very long, but it was still important. While people loved this ship at the time, fans look back at their relationship in hindsight and realize that their relationship was actually really cringeworthy and they did not belong together. First things first, they have an 18-year age gap between the two of them, which is an even larger age gap than Tim and Lucy had during their relationship. That's not even mentioning that Lucy was younger at this point than she was with dating Tim. So the age gap was even worse when you put it into perspective. Another reason why this was a cringeworthy relationship is because they were both rookies at the time and had to sneak around. They were acting like it was all fun and games, when in reality, this could have ended badly for Lucy. Since they were both rookies, if the LAPD found out about their secret relationship, it would brand Lucy for the rest of her career and make it much more difficult for her to be respected. Both Lucy and Nolan thought it was best to break it up for that reason. Nowadays, everyone just tries to forget this happened and they skip it when they rewatch the show. Timeline? This is on here because of the inconsistencies in the show's timeline, and fans are still confused to this day about what day it is and how old all the characters are. And to be honest, I don't blame them either, because each of the seasons are completely different lengths. Seasons 1 to 3 altogether were only 13 months, while season 4 on its own was over 18 months long. What's even worse is that things overall just don't line up. So according to season 7, episode 17, we find out that it is indeed April 2025. So it is around the present day from 2018 when it first started. So 7 years have passed. However, the ages haven't exactly caught up. For example, Lucy is supposedly 33 years old now, despite being 28 in the pilot. So that would be a 5-year difference. That or Tim being 43 while being 38 in the pilot. I wish the show would just fix these issues somehow. Lucy's Sergeant Speedrun. This refers to Lucy rising the ranks super quickly compared to other people in the cast, or honestly just faster than she should be. This is where another timeline inconsistency comes in. They mentioned that Lucy's only been patrol officer for 3 years by the time that she takes the sergeant exam. So let's say that's accurate. That is way too fast for a patrol officer to get promoted to sergeant. Tim was a training officer for over 10 years before getting promoted to sergeant. And Lucy's just gonna go for it after 3 years of being a P2? This isn't even mentioning that she went for detective earlier on in the show. And that was when she was basically a year out from being promoted to P2. I know she failed at making detective, but that is still way too fast of a climb on the ladder to make any sense. And she did successfully become Sergeant Lucy Chen. So now after 4 years of being on the force, including her probationary period, she is a sergeant already. One of the reasons she went for sergeant in the first place outside of actually trying to get the promotion is because if she became sergeant, Tim and Lucy are no longer in each other's chain of command. This means that Lucy can date Tim again. And this is why her becoming sergeant was so important to the plot. Clip Talk. Clip Talk is the main social media app that is in the universe of The Rookie. Initially, Clip Talk was just supposed to be the adaptation of TikTok, but this actually isn't the only thing that Clip Talk is. At one point in the show, they mentioned that Tamara was swiping on the app with a friend similar to Tinder. So Clip Talk also is a dating service of some sort. But that's not the only one. In season 4, episode 5, ACH, we're introduced to the Bomb X drug, and Pete uses it to be able to buy some using the hashtag. So I guess it also has a dealing functionality to it. Eventually, the showrunners just decided that Clip Talk would become the go-to whatever social media fits here social media app for the show. There are a couple exceptions to this though, as in a few instances, they actually do say TikTok. Like when they mentioned that Aaron Thorson was TikTok famous before joining the force. The show also directly mentions Reddit multiple times. Firefly. This was Nathan Fillion's other major show that he was on. However, this one is much different from Castle or The Rookie. Firefly only went on for 1 season between 2002 and 2003, and the show was based around a universal civil war that takes place 500 years in the future. And Nathan's character, Sergeant Malcolm Reynolds, and his crew have to survive a constant onslaught of intergalactic challenges. This show, unlike Castle, flopped really hard and was unfortunately canceled after only 14 episodes. But like Castle, Nathan Fillion has brought back old cast members from Firefly as guest stars on The Rookie. A few examples of this include Alan Tudyk as Elroy the crime cleaner, Sean Maher as Caleb Jost, who's one of the escaped convicts from season 1 episode 15 Manhunt, and Greg Henry, who plays a judge. Jackson's death controversy. This is on here because of the way that Jackson West was killed off after Titus Mackin Jr.'s departure from the show. Earlier in the video, we went over how Titus decided to leave the show after season 3, despite the show giving him everything that he wanted. This became an even bigger issue when season 4 was being written, because now Jackson is gone, and they had no idea how to explain it. They decided it was best for his character to just kill him off, but they ran into a major issue. Titus refused to come back to kill off Jackson, not even for a few scenes. So instead of having Titus there, they had a stunt double brought in to do the scene, which consisted of a quick 10-second scene where Gray, Nolan, and others watched security footage of Jackson being shot in the back. There was no dialogue involved in this scene, and this was how a main character had to be killed off. Fans of the show thought this was a very cheap way to kill off Jackson West, one of the most important characters to the show up to this point. But if you think about it, the show didn't really have any other choice. There was no other way to get rid of the character otherwise. Tim Love Triangle. What I mean by Tim Love Triangle is the sheer fact that Tim dated Lucy and Rachel, who are both best friends. I know, they dated each other at different times, but I still find this dynamic super interesting because of how it started in the first place. In season 2, episode 3, The Bet, Lucy was upset that Tim wouldn't let her wear short sleeves, and Tim was having trouble with his love life. So Lucy took advantage of it and said if she can get him a successful date, Tim would let her wear short sleeves. Fast forward, Lucy sets Tim up with Rachel, and while it looks like the date is going awful at first, Lucy visits Rachel the next day to find out that they had some fun together, which means that Lucy got her short sleeves. Tim and Rachel continued to date for a while until the end of season 2, where Rachel moves away. And while Tim initially agrees to try long distance out, it's clear when season 3 starts that it didn't work out, as we don't see her again for a very long time. Then later in season 5, Lucy and Tim end up getting together, which I find crazy that despite seeing how Tim kind of just threw Rachel away after she moved, that she would also give Tim a try. And it ended up happening to her too. Retiring. This point talks about the episode season 5, episode 5, The Fugitive, where Tim suffers from a back injury after a takedown while on patrol. This ended up being an exacerbation of the injury that he had during the pilot episode. He had to go through surgery in order to be able to get the fragment off of his spinal cord. Right after finding this out, Gray faints in the hospital elevator, which puts him in the hospital bed right next to Tim. This is where the retirement conversation comes into play. Gray, Tim, and Ashley discuss the possibility of Tim retiring, and Gray agrees with her because the disability pay is really good. Ashley also says that they could travel and move out of LA. Tim actually begins to think about retiring for the first time in his career, and then his surgery happened, and he found out that it was successful and he wasn't going to be paralyzed. Because of this, he decided that he wasn't going to retire, and this led to Ashley and Tim's breakup since she didn't want to deal with the stress anymore. Writer's strike. This was the 2023 WGA writer's strike that plagued the entire entertainment industry at the time, including The Rookie, as it took place during the production of season 6. The strike caused the entire season to be all over the place without any sort of direction, as they had to jam-pack 20 episodes worth of content into 10 episodes, and that's all the writing that they were able to get. Because of this, there were many holes and rushed plots. One of the biggest examples being the Monica Stevens plotline, where Blair was taken to Argentina to be killed, and then Nolan, Harper, and the FBI go to save her. While they do save her, Monica makes a run for it, and we just don't hear from her again for over half a season until season 7, episode 11, Speed. Luckily, the strike subsided by the time season 7 was ready to be written, and season 7 ended up being much better. Surprisingly, despite all the issues that plagued season 6, the season still was only the second worst rated season of the show, as reviewers still believed that season 6 was better than season 3 was. Grey's Anatomy. This refers to the multiple comments that the showrunner Alexi Hawley has made about the direction he wants to take the show. He has said in multiple interviews that he wants the show to become the next Grey's Anatomy and go on for 15, even 20 years, or even beyond that if the show was still popular. The show would be structured similar to Grey's, where there would be a cycling cast. This would mean that old cast members would be replaced by new ones over time as they began to retire, get killed off, or any other reason. They seem to already be starting this as they keep adding new rookies every couple of seasons. Fans are pretty split on this idea. On one hand, some fans want the show to go on for a very long time and would continue watching. On the other hand, some fans don't want the show to get repetitive and use the same plot lines with different people. People also point to the downfall of Grey's Anatomy once the original cast was completely missing. Let me know in the comments whether you think this is a good idea or not. Dim and Tim scene. This is talking about the one scene in season 4, episode 22, Day in the Hole, where Tim and Jake are in the same clip, played by the same actor at the same time. This is one of the most unique scenes in the entire show, as in order to make it happen, they had to use a very neat editing trick. What they did was they took the tree in the background as a buffer between 2 different clips that they recorded. Then they used the tree as the place to crop between 2 different clips, allowing them to make the scene happen. And as long as they didn't touch each other or cross over the tree, it would look natural. This is the only scene in the entire show where 2 characters by the same actor were in the same scene, as there was no clip like this for Lucy and Sava at any point. Surprisingly, this type of plotline would have worked better with Wesley though, as Wesley's actor Shawn Ashmore has an identical twin who is also an actor. Jumping the shark. Jumping the shark is a term used in entertainment. It means that the show has reached a point where it has gone too far and is introducing new ideas that are far above and beyond the original purpose. After the first seasons of the show, people began to say the rookie has started jumping the shark. Since season 4, the show has jumped the shark many times. Some examples of this is the La Fiera Guatemala heist in season 4 episode 1 Life and Death, the Tim and Juicy mission in season 5 episode 1 Double Down, the bombers on the bus in season 7 episode 11 Speed, not to mention the fact that they were involved with Monica, the Purge episode in season 7 episode 12 April Fools, and lastly, the biggest jump that I believe happened in the show is the literal nuke in season 7 episode 1 The Shot. Have they jumped the shark? Oh, absolutely. But is that really a bad thing? This is where fans are split once again. Some don't mind the jumping the shark, as it's just a TV show and it would be really boring if it was just real police work. Others think that the show needs to be more realistic like other cop shows. Once again, I want your guys' opinion on this, so let me know in the comments. Age gaps. There are actually a couple of other large age gaps in the show outside of Chen and Nolan's 18-year age gap. Their age gap is the largest, but it isn't the only double-digit age gap. Another notorious age gap in the show is the one between Tim Bradford and Lucy Chen, which is a 10-year gap between one another. Compared to Lucy and Nolan, this one is much more reasonable for multiple reasons, one of which is obvious, and that is that the gap is much smaller. The other reason is that both of the characters are at least in their 30s, as Lucy is 33 and Tim is 43, instead of the 46 and 28 that Nolan and Lucy were in season 1. The other age gap I want to point out is that Nolan and Bailey also have a large age gap. We don't know Bailey's exact age, but fans have guessed that her age is assumed to be somewhere around 40 years old, as she was in high school in the 90s, as well as she's still young enough to reasonably have a baby. As of now, Nolan is 51, so that would put them at around 10 to 11 year age gap. This one's barely even noticeable since they're both much older and there's no difference between a 40 and 50-year-old in terms of life experience. Documentaries. These refer to the 4 episodes throughout the show that are in a completely different filming style than the normal episodes. Instead of the normal policing format they usually do in the show, they turn the show into a documentary style episode that spends an entire runtime going over one specific plotline. These episodes help the show in a few areas. The documentary episodes break the monotony of the show every once in a while. These episodes also require less of a budget in order to produce them, which allows them to put the saved money into a bigger episode. And they also allow one specific plot to shine, like the Aaron Thorson case. The problem with these episodes though is that the audience is not very receptive to them, as these 4 episodes are all dead last for the worst rated episodes in the show, all of which being rated under 6 out of 10. The worst offender, however, is the newest one, which is season 7 episode 15, A Deadly Secret, as it's currently rated 3.4 out of 10, and is the only episode rated under a 4 out of 10. Lula Borg is a character actor who plays Skip Tracer Randy on the show. He has become one of the most controversial additions to the show in recent seasons, especially with his most recent appearance in season 7 episode 17, Mutiny and the Bounty, since he was one of the main characters in that episode rather than just a cameo or side character. While the Randy character is either extremely loved or hated without any in between, Lula himself is actually an OG YouTuber who was very loved back in his prime. He used to post random videos where he would just record in his car and then timestamp them in the titles. He also would do song covers in his car as well. Both types of videos proved to be very successful, as Flula amassed over 1 million subscribers over his time on the platform, as well as he's had a couple of dozen videos with over 1 million views, one of which with over 10 million. Flula actually still posts today, however the content is very different compared to what it used to be and is posted very inconsistently. 13 months. This is talking about the length of the LAPD probationary period in the show. This is actually an important detail because for some reason it's different than the length of the real life probationary period. In real life, the period in which an officer is a rookie is 12 months, which means the show decided to add an extra month. The reason for this has actually never been explained, which makes this one of the strangest changes that the writers have made between real life and the show. Additionally, Nolan's probationary period was extended by another month to 14 due to the reprimand he received in season 3. This is actually something else that the LAPD wouldn't actually do, as they would just bounce a rookie for what Nolan did. Instead, the real-life LAPD uses probationary period extensions as a tool to give a rookie more time to learn, rather than a punishment. Liam Glasser's return. Liam Glasser was a prominent villain in the early and middle parts of the most recent season, starting in Season 7, Episode 4, Darkness Falling, all the way up to Episode 8, Wildfire. He also had a cameo in Episode 15, A Deadly Secret, during Abigail's documentary because of his time at the psychiatric hospital. But that's not why he's on the Iceberg. In an MSN article interview with Alexi Hawley, he talks about how Liam Glasser is going to be Season 8's big villain, and how Lexi wants to try something new with Liam's storyline. He said, quote, "I mean, he's such a great actor and such a great character, and we've not really ever taken anything to trial before on our show because we're really a patrol show." But following that, he added, "We are talking about sort of like, is there more we can do?" And so I do think we very much might see him again down the road. This is huge because this could mean that we could get to explore the court side of things in the show with more depth, since we missed out on that with the Rosalyn Dyer case in Season 5's Double Down after her escape. Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson is a very famous actor who plays the character Pete Nolan, John Nolan's half-brother, throughout the series. The reason he's on this Iceberg, though, is because of a couple of things. But the main reason is that he seemingly disappeared from the show after the 4th season's finale, Day in the Hole, where him, Chastity, Bailey, and Nolan are all stuck with each other on the border while Nolan was sent off. Since then, he's only been mentioned in passing by other characters. Even when he's a main point in the episode, like in Season 7, Episode 17, Mutiny and the Bounty, there's no sign of him, despite multiple mentions of him. People began to wonder why he wasn't showing up anymore, and people began to think that it was because of his controversial reputation involving his comedy. But in reality, Pete Davidson loves the show and has wanted to come on again, but his schedule has always clashed with the show's, and he's just too busy to make room for it. Otherwise, I think we'd be seeing Pete more often. Speed. This is an episode in Season 7 that was inspired by and named after the 1994 thriller Speed. The episode uses the can't stop, won't stop bomb on a bus plotline that was used in the original, and there's a lot of similarities between the 1994 version and the adaptation in Season 7. The big plot point of the bus having to keep moving or else the bomber would detonate the bomb is the same in each of the properties, obviously. But did you know that the characters in each one also parallel each other? In the original version, the characters Jack, Harry, and Annie had to figure out how the villain, Payne, was behind the bomb on the bus operation. Meanwhile, in the Rookies adaptation, Gray, Penn, and the rest of the LAPD have to figure out who was behind the operation of their bomb. They're not exactly carbon copies, but the inspiration between the original version and the Rookies version are very apparent. Product placement. This refers to the obvious product placements that have taken place throughout the show, with the biggest example of this being in the very recent Season 7 episode Mad About Murder, where Bailey talks about Amazon Prime like it's a commercial line or something.
Amazon Prime. Gloves, belts, cleats, add to cart. Same day delivery, yes please. And purchased.
This couldn't have been any more obvious, and fans picked up on it immediately. Another example of this was back in Season 2, Episode 8, Clean Cut, with the Toyota Tundra product placement. This one was less obvious, but the way that the scene was shot with the multiple angles of the truck, as well as the overall heavier focus on the truck, has had people point it out as a product placement. The reception of these product placements are pretty mixed. One camp thinks that they are hilariously obvious and don't mind them, but another camp of people get really upset by the product placements, asking if the showrunners really need more money. Seth Engagement. One of the biggest events in recent episodes was when Seth Ridley came back in Season 7, Episode 16, The Return, despite being fired. But before that, just a few months prior, Tamara and Seth were seeing each other during the events of Season 7, Episode 7, The Mickey. And after Seth was let go in Season 7, Episode 10, we weren't given any confirmation that Tamara and Seth were still seeing each other. So since there was a chance that we'd never see Seth again, as well as Tamara's closeness to Lucy, the fan base assumed that they broke it off. But we were wrong about that, as when Seth returned in episode 16, we found out that they were still seeing each other, and Tamara was helping Seth try to get back in everyone's good graces. At the dinner that Seth, Tamara, Lucy, Tim, Selena, and Raj had in order to help reintegrate Seth and allow him to explain himself, Lucy found out about the engagement. However, she didn't find out by them telling her. She found out while looking at Tamara's hand and seeing her ring. After Lucy confronts Tamara about this, Tamara gets upset at her, takes Seth, and leaves the dinner. This causes a rift in their friendship until Seth confesses everything to Tamara and she breaks off the engagement. Simone. Simone is a controversial character that was introduced in Season 4's episode appropriately named Simone, where we see that she's training to be a part of the FBI. This episode, as well as the episode after it called Enervo, were actually secret backdoor pilot episodes for the brand new spinoff called The Rookie Feds. The show focused on her and her antics with the FBI. The original show actually does a couple of crossovers with the Feds spinoff throughout the 5th season, including episode 4, The Choice, episode 10, The List, and episode 21, Going Under. People heavily disliked these episodes because there was a lot of missing information in the original episodes that you could only get by watching Feds, like who Rosalyn's accomplice was in The Choice. But back to why people didn't like Simone specifically. People didn't like her because they believed that she was just an overall worse version of John Nolan without the humility. She also was seen as extremely annoying, like her overuse of honey and sweetie during cases, which did not fit an FBI agent at all. Because of Simone's character, The Rookie Feds flopped hard and was pulled after only one season. It's also now impossible to watch it on streaming without paying per episode, as Hulu pulled it off of their platform. Nathan Fitness. This refers to the sudden weight loss that Nathan Fillion experienced in between seasons 1 and 2 of the show. Nathan lost over 30 pounds in between the seasons because he wanted John Nolan more realistic. As an out-of-shape mid-40s rookie doing the stunts that Nolan had to, just doesn't make sense, and so he cut some weight off for the role. Fans noticed it relatively quickly since not only was his body slimmer, but his face started to have more wrinkles because there were less fat to prevent them. They weren't pointing this out as a bad thing, other than it made Nathan Fillion, and by extension John Nolan, look older than he actually is. Bailey and Jason marriage. Bailey Noon and Jason Weiler play an abusive ex-marriage in the show, with Jason going completely psycho on Bailey later on in the show after finding out that her and Nolan got married. But despite Bailey and Jason having this dynamic in the show, their real-life relationship couldn't be any more different. Jenna Dewan and Scott Kazee are actually together in real life, living their happiest lives. They also have multiple kids that they gush about all the time on their social medias. Fans found this out after Jason started to appear and were extremely impressed with how Jenna and Scott were able to play their characters so well, despite their relationship in real life. Their ability to put all their love aside for clips like this is incredible.
You isolated me from my family and friends. You made me think it was all my fault. When I say I am not the same person anymore, I mean it.
Athan Williamson. Athan Williamson was the actress for Talia Bishop in the first season of the show, and only the first season of the show. Athan decided that after the first season concluded that she would not be returning for a second season, and the reasons she gave were pretty heavy. She laid it out on social media. Athan claimed that working on the show was a horrible experience where she experienced different forms of racism and discrimination, as well as she felt that she was being sexually harassed by other members of the crew. These were some really big accusations that she made. So the show and its crew were investigated to make sure that if any of this was happening, that it was properly taken care of. However, no evidence of what she had claimed was found during the investigation, and the show has since moved on from this controversy. Seth and Monica. This refers to the super popular fan theory that circulated the internet during the early and middle parts of season 7. People believed that Seth Ridley was working under Monica as an insider into the LAPD to gain trust and obtain information, similar to Blair London in season 6 before she was compromised. Before episode 16, The Return, dropped, we saw the summary and teasers of the episode where Seth had returned to the LAPD. This made people believe that Monica pulled some strings in order to get Seth back into the department so that he could continue to obtain information. There was another group of fans that saw this differently though. They believed that while Seth was working with Monica, he used the lies to garner suspicion towards him in order to be saved. They thought that Seth wouldn't want to go out the way that Blair did, so by lying a bunch, it would get the LAPD to look into Seth more and figure out what's going on in order to get him out of it. But there were others who thought both of these theories were wrong and believed that Seth couldn't possibly be working for Monica. They believed that Seth was too messy of a person to possibly be under Monica because she's smarter than to hire someone like that. This group ended up being correct, as Seth is not connected to Monica in any way, as we know of. Anything could change in season 8, of course. Bailey pregnancy. Jenna Dewan, the actress for Bailey that we had mentioned earlier, was pregnant during the majority of the filming for season 7. This pregnancy was treated completely differently than the other actresses' pregnancies during the show. Both Alyssa Diaz, the actress for Angela Lopez, and Mekia Cox, the actress for Nyla Harper, were pregnant throughout the show. Alyssa was pregnant during the show twice actually, spaced a few years apart. When both of these two were pregnant during filming, they decided to incorporate these pregnancies into the show. This means that Lopez and Harper were having babies alongside their actresses. The same could not be said for Bailey though. They actively hid her pregnancy during the filming of season 7, so you weren't able to tell that she was ever pregnant at all. This is really odd though, because part of the plot line at this time was that Bailey and Nolan were thinking of having a kid. So why then did they hide her pregnancy on the one time that a baby was actually being planned in the show? That I will never understand. Rosalyns Death. For this, we have to go back to season 5, episode 4, The Choice, where Rosalind Dyer is realizing that she isn't going to be free for much longer. So she decides to go out with a bang. She has a puppet of hers create a contraption that would kill Bailey Noon, and then would torture John Nolan with this in order to fix him in her eyes. She always saw Nolan as a saint, somebody that couldn't do wrong or do an evil act. However, before she went out, she wanted to change this. She lured him to a hillside estate, where she forced him to make a choice. Let Bailey die in the contraption, or shoot her and become a murderer. She thought this would work, but it didn't, and John arrested her to take her in. However, while walking to the car, she was sniped and killed. This was a fallback plan in case the main one didn't work, because she didn't want to go back to jail. And this ended the reign of Rosalind. But it wasn't ever supposed to be this way. And if it wasn't for an unfortunate circumstance in real life, she may have still been around today. Annie Wershing, the actress for Rosalind, was diagnosed with cancer in 2020. And this battle went on for a strong 2 years up to this point. It wasn't going in the right direction though. So she and the show wanted to end Rosalind off in the best way possible. And that's when this episode was born. She died 3 months after the episode aired of her battle with cancer. Norcross cameo. This refers to the cameo appearance that William Norcross made in season 1, episode 19, The Checklist. William Norcross, if you didn't know, is the man that the Rookie's premise is loosely based off of. He was a mid-40s white male who worked in a career that he was growing dissatisfied with and decided to enlist in the LAPD and follow his dream. So while his story wasn't as action-packed as John Nolan's story, the basic outline and premise was there, and hence the Rookie was born. William actually became an executive producer for the show as it began to take shape, and he became more hands-on with the show. So when they decided to do a raid scene in episode 19, William wanted in on it. He, alongside John Nolan and the other LAPD officers, were heading into a raid. Norcross actually leads the way into this raid, as he opens the door for the rest of the officers to sabotage the operation. There's multiple times other than that in this scene where you can spot him. Wildfire. Wildfire is season 7, episode 8 of the show. Seems like just some random episode at first, but this episode had a major problem. And it's not actually the show or the episode's fault. The plot to this episode was that the LAPD had to assist in evacuating the city due to a wildfire that began in the hills. And at the same time, they had to manage the surveillance that they kept on Liam Glasser, one of the biggest suspects for a round of serial killings. This episode is also important because within it, 2 of the main characters could have died during the wildfire, as Tim and Lucy went onto a road that they shouldn't have gone on since Seth never called in that Eagle Rock Road was off limits. The main problem, however, was nothing within the episode. It was involving the release of it. The episode was very poorly timed, as a week after the confirmed release date of the episode, real-life LA wildfires broke out and were displacing hundreds of thousands of families and destroying large chunks of wildlife. Nobody was mad at the show, obviously, since they couldn't have known that it was going to happen. But the release ended up being a good thing, as it was used to help LA wildfire victims by spreading awareness of the support hotlines. Tim's abuse. So this entry stems mostly from season 4, episode 8, Hit and Run, where we hear a lot about the relationship between Tim Bradford and his father. The show goes into a lot of detail about the abuse that Tim went through, physically, mentally, and emotionally. This was supposed to be a super heartfelt moment for Tim, as we haven't really heard about his childhood much up to this point in the show. But Jennifer and even Lucy ruin this moment. Jennifer completely writes this off and gaslights Tim about what he went through. She downplays the abuse that Tim was subject to and says that their dad is a changed man, not at all caring about how Tim felt. What's even stranger is that Lucy added fuel to this fire during the ride-along with Tim and Jennifer, as she began to ask them very invasive questions about their childhood. Then, Lucy tells Tim that his sister has a point and that he should listen to her. This seemed really out of character for Lucy's personality, as she's usually super compassionate, but that's my personal gripe on it. This ends up leading to Tim confronting his dad with all of his feelings before leaving in a stone-cold manner, as if his dad was dead to him. Foxburg doesn't exist. Foxburg, Pennsylvania is the hometown of John Nolan that we see in the pilot and is referred to later in future episodes. What we are shown in the episodes is this larger but still pretty small bustling old school town. But this doesn't actually exist in real life, as the showrunners completely made this Foxburg up. The Foxburg that the show films at is in Fillmore, California, as well as the bank scenes were filmed in Oxnard, California. There technically is a real-life Foxburg, Pennsylvania, but this is a very small unincorporated territory with not even 150 people who live here. Bailey written off. So this circles back to when they were hiding her pregnancy in the 7th season. There's a big fan theory that Bailey is going to get killed off in season 8. And there's actually some pretty convincing arguments for why this might be true. First things first, it's speculated that her pregnancy was hidden because if they were planning on killing off Bailey, having her have a kid just to die and leave Nolan as a single father would be a really cruel plotline that nobody would have liked. So it was best just to write it out. Another thing that people are pointing out is that with Jason dead and the Malvado stuff still looming in the air, it's bound to blow up again. People think that the show is planning to do this because Bailey has been very controversial since she joined, and they think that the showrunners are backtracking her and want to let her go at some point. Some fans have pointed out that her decrease in screen time in the last half of the season, but this literally could have just been because she was having a baby and she couldn't work as long, as well as she wanted to spend more time with her partner. We'll just have to see what happens in season 8. Percy Disappeared. This refers to Percy West, Jackson's father and commander of internal affairs in the LAPD, and his mysterious disappearance, for the most part, from the show since season 3. Percy was a pretty important side character to the show from the first 3 seasons, where he acted as Jackson's main inspiration for joining the academy and becoming a police officer. The internal affairs side of his character didn't really come out until the end of the season though, with the Elena and Bishop situation. He did a lot of that throughout season 3 though, especially with the Armstrong and Nolan scandal. However, after his appearance in season 3 episode 8 Bad Blood, he disappears and we don't see him for a very long time. He only returned for a split second in season 6 episode 6 Secret and Lies to interview Bradford for his crimes while in the army, and then he was gone again. Nobody really knows why he disappeared for so long after season 3, but some fans believe that it was because of Jackson being killed off. Now that Jackson wasn't in the show, maybe Percy wasn't needed anymore. But realistically, it was because he had some pretty big roles in other shows that he was doing that directly correlated with the time that he's been missing. 2 examples of which are season 4 of SWAT that aired in 2021, as well as Tulsa King that has been on the air for at least 2 years now. Bishop and the Married Man. We find out in season 1 episode 12 Heartbreak the Valentine's Day episode, about why exactly Bishop hates Valentine's Day so much, and it's because of a married man that she previously dated. This man was all lovey-dovey with her, sending her flowers on Valentine's Day, and then randomly decided to leave and go back to his wife. This soured Bishop's perception of Valentine's Day, and I'll be honest, who can really blame her? That would be awful to go through. The reason it's so far down this list is because nobody actually knows who this married man is, as it was never mentioned by Bishop during the episode. This has caused fans to start theorizing if it was some random man or if it actually was somebody that the audience knew. There was a camp of fans who had an insane theory about who this man is though. These fans believe that it could have been Lieutenant Gray, but the majority of people think this is ridiculous, including myself, because Gray is so loyal to his wife and it would be very out of character. Armstrong in the dark. This refers to the actor of Nick Armstrong being in the dark, not the character. Harold Perrineau was told that his character was hiding something, but the show intentionally didn't tell him what was coming and he was given no advance notice. This was for a couple of reasons. Number one, they wanted him to act a lot more naturally. Nick Armstrong in his last few episodes was very erratic and wasn't thinking straight, and by not giving Harold any notice, he also was very erratic since he had to come up with how to do it on the spot. Another reason that they didn't tell him he was a dirty cop was because that would mean that he would have known too soon that his time on the show was coming to an end. When an actor knows that their time is almost up, their work ethic tends to slow down, and they didn't want this with Harold. Amanda Knox. This is referring to the real-life story that Aaron Thorson's story is based off of in the show. Back in 2007, she was wrongfully committed of the murder of her roommate, Meredith. Knox was the one that called the police after finding Meredith's bedroom door locked, and due to a sloppy investigation, Knox was implicated as the main suspect for the murder, alongside a couple of other people named Rafael Celestino, her boyfriend, as well as her employer Lumumba. While the latter was released shortly after, Amanda and Rafael were sentenced to 25 years in prison. Due to a prolonged legal process with a lot of mistrials, her appeal was successful, and she was exonerated of the crime in 2011. This is very similar to Aaron's story, as he was arrested for the killing of his best friend Patrick Hayes after Aaron called the police. He, similar to Knox, had to spend time in prison and had to experience multiple mistrials before finally being exonerated by the courts and was let free. Seth isn't done. We mentioned before that Seth came back to the LAPD after suing the department for wrongful termination in Season 7, Episode 16, The Return. But we haven't talked about what else happened in that episode yet. Now that he's back on the force, Dolan takes him under his wing as his TO. And while Seth doesn't understand it just yet, it's going to take a very long time for him to gain people's trust back after all of his lies. But near the end of the episode, while trying to apprehend one of the criminals involved in the escape of Gene Webster, Dolan was about to be shot, and Seth jumped out to shoot the guy. He shoots Seth's leg with a shotgun, and he has to get his leg amputated. In the episode, he thinks he has to resign, but Nolan tells him he doesn't have to, and once he learns how to use a prosthetic, he can come back. Nolan also points out that his sacrifice won him back a lot of favor, and he should use it as a stepping stone to redeem his career. A lot of fans are happy he's gone, but they may not be happy for too long once they hear about this. In an interview from Who Let Us Out on YouTube with 3,000 views, about 3 minutes in, Patrick talks about Lisette and Selena and hopes to tap into that going into our next season. He also mentions he's not in the rookie group chat because he's not yet a main cast member. Maybe it's just the words he used, but I think he'll be back in the next season or two. Nolan's first kill. This talks about Season 1, Episode 8, Time of Death, where Nolan kills his first person on duty. It was a man who points a gun at him while trying to escape, and Nolan reacts quickly and shoots him. This shot ends up being lethal, however, making this Nolan's first kill on the job. An investigation was opened, and Nolan was at risk of being sentenced to murder. This kill affected Nolan emotionally, as he was terrified of being sent to jail for life. But luckily, almost everyone in the LAPD was on his side. This episode showed an in-depth look into what happens to fatal shots when doing police work, but they also never show this process again for other kills. This is because it would be too repetitive and boring to show over and over, on top of the show toning down the realism in later seasons. Everyone's a murderer, so this is a fun fact that a lot of people don't know or get wrong very often. Everyone in the original cast of the show has killed someone on duty, except for Lucy Chen. A lot of people do believe she's killed someone, and they refer to season 6, episode 4 as evidence. But she didn't kill in that episode. She was close though. Lucy did shoot Jeff Budney, a serial killer, after he raised his rifle on her, and it looked like he was going to die as he was in serious critical condition, but he ended up surviving the shot. When it comes to their kills, some people are very scarred by the event, such as Nolan with his kill, whereas others are pretty unfazed by it, like Tim and Lopez, likely from them being desensitized. While Lucy is the only one who hasn't yet, I personally think this will change in season 8. And finally, villain in the elevator. In season 5, episode 22, Under Siege, there's a scene in the episode that has a very crazy Easter egg in it, but you have to pay really good attention to spot it. About 7 minutes into the episode, Dolan is walking out of the elevator at the hospital. Along with Nolan, there are 2 other people that get out of the elevator. One of them is just a random guy that doesn't really matter, but the other one is super important. This middle-aged man that is in the elevator behind Nolan is the overarching villain in the episode. And in this clip, we see him over 30 minutes before he's actually introduced in the episode. At the way end of the episode, we can see this man in the row of Escalades going down the road to hit their bigger target. It's crazy that the show did this, and it took me a few rewatches of the episode to put the pieces together. But that's the entire Rookie Iceberg. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like if you want more longer videos like this in the future. Wait a second. What's that at the bottom? Hold on. Is that the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion?